The bruise on her ribs was still purple when Sophia Hayes signed the divorce papers. Not that anyone could see it. Long sleeves hid the fingerprint marks on her upper arms. Foundation covered the fading yellow under her eye from 2 weeks ago. And no one looked at the mother in the family court waiting room closely enough to notice that she moved too carefully, like someone whose body hurt in places makeup couldn't reach. Sophia was 32 years old. She had a 4-year-old daughter named Grace, and she was about to face her soon-to-be ex-husband, Marcus Hayes, in a divorce proceeding where he had 3 expensive lawyers, and she had a court-appointed attorney she'd met 15 minutes ago. The odds were not in her favor. "Mrs. Hayes?" A young woman in a professional suit appeared in the doorway. "I'm Jennifer Chen from the Family Law Clinic. I'll be representing you today." Sophia stood, trying not to wince as her bruised ribs protested the movement. "Thank you for taking my case." "Of course. Let's find somewhere quiet to talk before we go in." They settled into a small conference room. Jennifer spread papers across the table, divorce petition, custody documents, financial disclosures that Marcus's lawyers had submitted. "I need to be honest with you," Jennifer said, her voice kind but direct. "Your husband has significant resources. His legal team is very experienced. They're going to argue that you're an unfit mother, that you abandoned the marital home, that you have no means to support your daughter." "I left because he was hurting me," Sophia said quietly. "I have hospital records, police reports from 2 incidents, photos I took of injuries." "I know. I've reviewed everything you submitted. But Mrs. Hayes, Sophia, Marcus's team is going to claim you're lying, that the injuries were accidental, that you're fabricating abuse to gain advantage in the divorce." "So I'm going to lose custody of Grace?" "Not if I can help it, but I want you to understand what we're facing. Marcus makes $340,000 a year as a hedge fund manager. You haven't worked in 5 years because he insisted you stay home. He's offering you $800 a month in child support and supervised visitation, with Grace pending a psychological evaluation." Sophia felt the room tilt slightly. "Supervised visitation? I'm her mother. I've taken care of her every day of her life." "I know. His lawyers are claiming you're unstable, that leaving suddenly and taking Grace to a women's shelter demonstrates poor judgment and potential danger to the child." "He was choking me," Sophia said, voice shaking. "In front of Grace. That's when I finally left. She watched her father choke her mother and I couldn't let her see that again. Couldn't let her think that's normal." Jennifer's expression softened. "I believe you, and we're going to fight this. But you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the judge might order temporary custody arrangements that aren't what you want." Before Sophia could respond, there was a knock on the conference room door. A man appeared, late 30s, expensive suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent at the tiny apartment she'd moved to after leaving the shelter. "Jennifer," he said, "I need to speak with you now, privately." Jennifer looked confused. "Mr. Castellano, I'm with a client." "I'm aware. This is about Mrs. Hayes' case. Conference room 3, 2 minutes." He left without waiting for a response. Jennifer looked at Sophia apologetically. "That's Michael Castellano. He's a senior partner at one of the best family law firms in New York. I have no idea why he wants to talk to me about your case, but I should probably find out." "Go ahead, I'll wait here." Jennifer left. Sophia sat alone in the conference room, trying not to panic. In 20 minutes, she'd be in front of a judge. Marcus would be there with his 3 lawyers, looking successful and credible, and completely unlike the man who'd put his hands around her throat 3 weeks ago. And she'd have a court-appointed attorney who seemed competent but outgunned. Jennifer returned 5 minutes later. Her expression had changed, confusion mixed with something that might have been hope. "Sophia, something very unexpected just happened." "What?" "Michael Castellano is taking over your case. As of right now, he's your attorney." Sophia blinked. "What? Why would... I can't afford..." "Pro bono. He's representing you for free." Jennifer was clearly as confused as Sophia. "He said he reviewed your case file and believes you have grounds for emergency protective custody of Grace, full custody pending the divorce, and significant spousal support based on Marcus's coercive control and financial abuse." "I don't understand. Why would an expensive lawyer take my case for free?" "I don't know. But Sophia, Michael Castellano doesn't lose custody cases. If he's representing you..." Your odds just changed completely. "What would you have done? Would you have questioned why a powerful attorney suddenly wanted to help you? Or would you have been too desperate to care?" 20 minutes later, Sophia sat in a courtroom next to Michael Castellano, while Marcus and his 3 attorneys sat across the aisle. Marcus looked exactly as he always did, handsome, composed, wearing the expensive watch Sophia had given him for their 5th anniversary before everything went wrong. He caught her eye and smiled slightly. That smile that looked friendly to observers, but that Sophia knew meant, "You think you're getting away from me." Judge Patricia Morrison entered. Everyone stood. The proceedings began. Marcus's lead attorney, a man named Richard Sutton, who Sophia recognized from billboards advertising his firm, presented their case first. Your Honor, Mr. Hayes is a successful professional with significant financial resources and a stable home environment. Mrs. Hayes abandoned the marital residence, taking their daughter to a homeless shelter without warning. She has no employment, no permanent residence, and has made unsubstantiated allegations of abuse that Mr. Hayes categorically denies. Sutton presented character witnesses. Marcus's colleagues, their former neighbors, people who described Marcus as dedicated and loving, who'd never seen any signs of abuse. Mr. Hayes is requesting primary physical custody with supervised visitation for Mrs. Hayes pending a complete psychological evaluation. He's concerned about his daughter's welfare and wants to ensure she's in a stable environment. Judge Morrison looked at Michael Castellano. Counselor, your response? Michael stood. He moved like someone completely comfortable in courtrooms, someone who'd done this hundreds of times and won most of them. Your Honor, may I approach with evidence? He presented a folder to the judge, then provided copies to opposing counsel. Sophia hadn't seen these documents before. Your Honor, this is a complete financial analysis of Mr. and Mrs. Hayes' marriage. It documents a pattern of financial abuse spanning 7 years. Mr. Hayes controlled all bank accounts. Mrs. Hayes had no access to funds without his explicit permission. He monitored every purchase she made, credit cards in her name that she was never allowed to use, life insurance policies that named him as sole beneficiary. Michael's voice was calm, professional, devastating in its precision. This is evidence from Mrs. Hayes' medical records. 4 emergency room visits in 6 years for injuries Mr. Hayes claims were accidents: a separated shoulder, fractured wrist, severe bruising, concussion. The ER doctors noted in their reports that the injuries were inconsistent with described circumstances. He presented more documents. Testimony from staff at Harbor Grace Women's Shelter, where Mrs. Hayes and Grace stayed for 2 weeks after leaving the marital home. Photographs Mrs. Hayes took of injuries sustained during the marriage, time-stamped and dated. Police reports from 2 incidents where neighbors called 911 after hearing screaming and sounds of violence. Sutton stood. Your Honor, none of this proves... I'm not finished. Michael's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Sutton sit back down. Your Honor, I also have testimony from Grace Hayes' pediatrician, Dr. Sarah Martinez, who has treated Grace since birth. He handed another document to the judge. Dr. Martinez has documented multiple conversations with Grace about when Daddy gets angry. Grace has described witnessing violence. She's exhibited signs of childhood trauma, nightmares, bedwetting that started at age 3, anxiety when male voices are raised. Dr. Martinez reported suspected child abuse to CPS 8 months ago, but the investigation was closed when Mr. Hayes' attorneys intervened. The courtroom had gone very quiet. Mr. Hayes presents himself as a concerned father. What he actually is, Your Honor, is a domestic abuser who used his financial resources to trap his wife in a violent marriage for 7 years, who hurt her in front of their daughter, and who is now using those same financial resources to take custody of the child he traumatized. Judge Morrison studied the documents. These are serious allegations. They're documented facts, Your Honor. Mrs. Hayes didn't abandon her home. She fled for her life with her daughter after Mr. Hayes strangled her. She went to a shelter because it was the only safe place she could go. And now Mr. Hayes wants to punish her for leaving by taking away the daughter she protected. Marcus's face had gone pale. His attorneys were whispering urgently. Your Honor, Sutton tried again. Mr. Castellano is presenting a one-sided narrative. Is Dr. Martinez's testimony inaccurate? Michael asked. Did she not report suspected abuse? Did CPS not close the investigation after Mr. Hayes hired attorneys to intervene? Sutton didn't answer. Judge Morrison looked at Marcus directly. Mr. Hayes, did you hire attorneys to intervene in a CPS investigation? Marcus's lead attorney whispered something to him. Marcus's jaw tightened. I retained counsel to ensure my rights were protected during a baseless investigation. Your rights, Michael said quietly, or your ability to continue abusing your wife and daughter without consequence. Your Honor, Sutton was on his feet. This is inflammatory. It's accurate, Michael interrupted. And Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence. He pulled out a phone and connected it to the courtroom's display system. This is security footage from the lobby of the building where Mr. and Mrs. Hayes lived, dated 3 weeks ago, the night Mrs. Hayes left. The video showed a lobby, timestamp visible, 11:47 p.m. The elevator doors opened. Sophia emerged, carrying Grace, who was sleeping against her shoulder. Even in the grainy footage, you could see that Sophia was crying, moving carefully, clutching her daughter. Behind her, Marcus emerged from the same elevator. In the video, he grabbed Sophia's arm, pulled her back. The audio was unclear, but you could see him yelling, could see Sophia trying to shield Grace, could see the doorman approaching and Marcus immediately letting go, smoothing his expression into something reasonable. Could see Sophia running out of the building with her daughter. The courtroom was silent. The doorman on duty that night has provided testimony, Michael said. Mr. Hayes told him there was a marital disagreement and asked him not to call the police. The doorman complied. Mrs. Hayes took her daughter to Harbor Grace Shelter at midnight because she had nowhere else safe to go. Judge Morrison's expression had hardened as she watched the video. She looked at Marcus, then at Sophia, then at the lawyers on both sides. I'm issuing a temporary order, she said. Full physical custody to Mrs. Hayes pending the final divorce decree. Mr. Hayes will have supervised visitation twice weekly at an approved facility. Mrs. Hayes is granted exclusive use of the marital residence. Mr. Hayes will vacate within 48 hours. Temporary spousal support of $6,500 monthly and child support of $2,800 monthly, effective immediately. Sutton stood. Your Honor, if we could request denied. Mr. Hayes's attorneys can file an appeal, but this order stands until the final hearing. Judge Morrison looked at Sophia. Mrs. Hayes, I'm also issuing a restraining order. Mr. Hayes is not to contact you except through attorneys or at supervised visitation. Violation will result in immediate arrest. The gavel came down. Sophia couldn't breathe. She'd expected to lose, expected Marcus to use his money and his lawyers and his respectable image to take Grace away, expected to be punished for leaving. Instead, she'd won. Temporary, but still, she'd won. Thank you, she whispered to Michael Castellano. I don't understand why you helped me, but thank you. Michael gathered his papers, not looking at her. You don't need to understand. You just need to keep yourself and Grace safe until the final hearing. But I can't pay you. I didn't ask you to pay me. His voice was firm. Just focus on rebuilding your life. Sophia moved back into the house she'd fled from 3 weeks earlier. It felt strange, both familiar and alien. This was where she'd lived with Marcus for 7 years, where she'd been happy for the first 2 years, confused for the next 2, terrified for the last 3. Now it was just hers and Grace's. Marcus had removed his belongings in the 48 hours the judge had allowed. The house felt emptier, but also cleaner, like something toxic had been cleared out. Grace seemed lighter too. She laughed more, started sleeping through the night again, stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. 2 weeks after the custody hearing, Michael Castellano's office called Sophia. Mr. Castellano would like to meet with you tomorrow at 4 p.m. if you're available. It's about your divorce case. Sophia arrived at the law offices of Castellano and Partners the next afternoon. The firm occupied 3 floors of a building in Midtown. Elegant, expensive, the kind of place that screamed success. Michael's office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stood when she entered, gesturing to a chair. Sophia, thank you for coming. I wanted to discuss next steps for your divorce. Okay. Marcus's attorneys are proposing a settlement. They want to avoid going to trial. What are they offering? Michael slid papers across his desk. Full custody to you, $8,000 monthly in combined spousal and child support for the next 8 years. Half of all marital assets, including the house, retirement accounts, an investment portfolio. Marcus keeps his own retirement funds. You'd walk away with approximately $340,000 in liquid assets plus the house, which is worth around $1.2 million. Sophia stared at the papers. That's everything I asked for. More than I asked for. It's less than you deserve, but it's a reasonable settlement that gives you financial security and full custody. My recommendation is that you accept it. Why are they offering this? Marcus wanted to take Grace from me. Why would he agree to this? Michael was quiet for a moment. Because I made it very clear that if we go to trial, I will present every piece of evidence I have about his abuse. The doorman footage is already public record from the custody hearing, but I also have testimony from other witnesses, documentation of his behavior, evidence that would destroy his professional reputation. You threatened him. I informed him of consequences. There's a difference. Michael's expression was unreadable. Marcus Hayes built his career on being respectable and successful. A public trial where evidence of domestic violence is presented would end that. His firm wouldn't keep him. His clients wouldn't work with him. The life he's built would collapse. So he's choosing his reputation over fighting for custody. He's choosing the path that costs him least, which is what bullies do when confronted with consequences. Sophia looked at this man, this attorney who'd appeared out of nowhere and saved her from losing everything. Why did you take my case? Really? Michael stood and walked to his window. My father is Vincent Castellano. You may have heard of him. Sophia had. Vincent Castellano was allegedly the head of one of New York's organized crime families. The name came up in news articles about the Maffia, about corruption investigations, about a world Sophia had never been part of. Your father is connected to organized crime, according to law enforcement. A successful businessman, according to official records. Both things are probably true. Michael turned back to her. My mother was killed by my father's enemies when I was 10 years old. Car bomb meant for him. She was collateral damage in a war that had nothing to do with her. I'm so sorry. After she died, my father made a decision. He kept his business interests, legal and otherwise, but he also started protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Women in dangerous situations, families threatened by violence, people who'd slipped through the cracks of legal protection. Michael sat back down. I didn't want any part of his world. I went to law school, became a legitimate attorney, built a practice helping families, but I still operate by my father's code. When someone needs protection and the system fails them, you step in. How did you even know about my case? My father has connections throughout the city, including at family court. When your case came across his radar, a woman with documented abuse, going up against a wealthy husband with expensive lawyers, about to lose custody of her daughter, he called me. Your father sent you to help me? He asked if I'd look at your case. What I found made me angry enough to take it. Michael's voice was calm, but something underneath wasn't. Marcus Hayes is exactly the kind of abuser who wins in family court. Rich, respectable, able to afford lawyers who know how to make victims look unstable. The system is built for people like him. But you beat him. Because I have resources most attorneys don't. I have investigators who can find evidence others miss. I have connections that open doors. And I have a father whose reputation makes opposing counsel nervous about pushing too hard. Sophia absorbed this. So, you're using your family's criminal connections to win legitimate legal cases. I'm using every tool available to protect people who need protection. Sometimes those tools come from complicated sources. Michael looked at her directly. Does that bother you? Sophia thought about Marcus's hands around her throat, about Grace asking why Daddy was angry all the time, about facing 3 expensive lawyers with a court-appointed attorney who'd met her 15 minutes before the hearing. No, she said, it doesn't bother me. You saved my daughter. I don't care how. Then sign the settlement. Take the house and the money. Build a life where Marcus can't control you anymore. Sophia signed. 6 months later, Sophia had transformed her life in ways she'd stopped believing were possible. The house was hers. Legally, finally, completely. She'd redecorated, removing every trace of Marcus's presence. Grace had her own room painted the purple she'd always wanted, but Marcus had said was too bright. The kitchen had photos on the refrigerator. The living room had toys scattered across the floor. It looked like a home instead of a museum. Sophia had also gone back to work, not to the finance job she'd left when Marcus insisted she stay home, but to something she'd always wanted to try. She'd started a small business, organizing estate sales and helping people downsize. It wasn't making much money yet, but it was hers. built on her skills, run on her schedule, growing slowly. Grace was thriving. She saw Marcus twice a week at a supervised visitation center, and those visits seemed enough for her. She didn't ask to see him more. Mostly she talked about her new school, her friends, the art class Sophia had enrolled her in. She'd stopped having nightmares. One evening, Sophia received a call from Michael Castellano's office. Mr. Castellano would like to invite you to a charity event his firm is hosting. It's a fundraiser for Harbor Grace Shelter, the place where you stayed. He thought you might like to attend. Sophia attended. The event was at an elegant venue in Manhattan, full of well-dressed people donating money to help women leaving domestic violence situations. She found Michael standing near the bar, looking uncomfortable in the formal setting despite his expensive tuxedo. "You made it," he said. "Thank you for inviting me and for supporting Harbor Grace. That shelter saved my life." "I know. That's why my firm has made it our primary charitable focus." He gestured around the room. "All of this, the fundraiser, the donations, exists because my father believes that protecting women like you is more important than any business interest." "Is he here tonight?" "No. My father doesn't attend public events. Too much law enforcement attention." Michael smiled slightly. "But he'll know how much we raised, and he'll make sure it gets to the right programs." They stood together, watching wealthy donors mingle and write checks. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said. "Of course. Do you ever regret it? Using your family's connections to practice law? Operating in that gray area between legal and less legal?" Michael considered the question. "I regret that it's necessary. I wish the legal system actually protected people like you. I wish family courts didn't favor wealthy abusers. I wish women didn't need someone like me to fight for them." He paused. "But I don't regret helping. Every woman I get custody for, every abuser I stop, that's one less person who ends up like my mother. Your father is lucky to have you carrying on his mission legitimately. He tells me I'm too soft, that I should use more aggressive tactics. But I think there's more power in beating people like Marcus within the legal system, proving that money doesn't always win, that victims can fight back and succeed." Over the next year, Sophia and Michael developed an unlikely friendship. He checked in occasionally, making sure Marcus was following the custody agreement, that the support payments were arriving, that Sophia wasn't having problems. He also started referring other women to Sophia's business, clients going through divorces who needed help liquidating assets or organizing households. It was steady, work that helped her business grow. And Sophia started volunteering at Harbor Grace Shelter, helping other women navigate the process she'd survived, teaching them about their rights, connecting them with resources, sometimes connecting them with Michael Castellano when they needed an attorney who'd fight for them. 2 years after her divorce was finalized, Sophia was asked to speak at a fundraising event for Harbor Grace. She stood at a podium in front of 200 people and told her story. Not all of it. She didn't mention Vincent Castellano or the complicated sources of Michael's resources, but she told enough. About leaving with Grace at midnight, about facing Marcus's expensive lawyers with no resources of her own, about the attorney who'd appeared from nowhere and fought for her when she couldn't afford to fight for herself. "I'm not going to lie and say the system worked," Sophia said. "The system failed me repeatedly. Police who said there was nothing they could do. A family court process designed to favor wealth over safety. Laws that protected my abuser's rights more than my daughter's well-being." She paused. "But there are people who work within that broken system and find ways to protect people anyway. Attorneys who take cases pro bono, judges who see through respectable appearances to the truth underneath, shelters that provide safety when you have nowhere else to go. And sometimes, not often enough, but sometimes, those people succeed." After the speech, Michael approached her. "That was powerful. You should do more public speaking." "I'm terrified of public speaking." "You hide it well," he smiled. "Sophia, I wanted to tell you something. My father wants to meet you." Sophia's stomach tightened. "Why?" "Because he's heard about your volunteer work at the shelter, about how you help other women navigate leaving abusive situations. He thinks you could help even more women if you had resources." "What kind of resources?" "He wants to fund a program, legal advocacy for domestic violence survivors. You'd run it. Connect women with attorneys, help them navigate family court, provide support through the process. He'd provide the funding." "Why would he trust me to run something like that?" "Because you've lived it. Because you help people without asking what's in it for you, and because my father has good instincts about who can be trusted." Michael paused. It would be legitimate work, no connection to his other business interests, just a foundation helping women leave dangerous situations. Sophia thought about all the women she'd met at Harbor Grace, all the ones who'd had even fewer resources than she'd had, all the ones who'd lost custody because they couldn't afford lawyers like Michael. "I'd need to meet him first," she said. "Understand what he's actually proposing." "Of course, I'll arrange it." Vincent Castellano's office was not what Sophia expected. She'd imagined something dark and intimidating. Instead, it was elegant and comfortable. Bookshelves full of actual books, artwork that looked like it belonged in museums, furniture that was expensive but not ostentatious. Vincent himself was in his early 70s with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen everything and been changed by very little of it. He stood when Sophia entered, extending his hand. "Mrs. Hayes, thank you for coming." "Mr. Castellano! Please sit. Can I offer you anything? Coffee, tea?" "I'm fine, thank you." Vincent sat across from her in a comfortable chair. "Michael tells me you've been helping women at Harbor Grace Shelter navigate the divorce process." "I volunteer there twice a week, help women understand their rights, connect them with resources. Sometimes I go to court with them for moral support." "And how many women have you helped?" "Maybe 40 over the past 2 years. It's hard to keep exact count." 40 women who might have lost custody or stayed with abusers if you hadn't helped them. Vincent's voice was calm, matter of fact. "That's significant work. It's the least I can do. Harbor Grace saved my life. Helping other women is how I pay that forward. I want to help you help more women. I'm prepared to establish a foundation, the Grace Foundation, if you'll allow us to name it after your daughter. Initial funding of $2 million. You'd be the executive director. Salary of $120,000 annually plus benefits." Sophia couldn't speak for a moment. Why would you do that?" "Because domestic violence destroys families. I know this personally. My wife was killed because of my enemies. I've spent 30 years trying to prevent other families from being destroyed the same way. But I have no experience running a foundation. You have experience surviving abuse and helping other survivors. That's more valuable than any MBA." Vincent leaned forward slightly. "Sophia, I've built power through complicated methods. Some legal, some less so. I can't undo the choices I made, but I can use the resources those choices created to help people who need it." Michael said the foundation would be completely legitimate. "It will be. Properly incorporated, fully transparent, all donations documented and legal. The only connection to my other interests is that I'm providing the initial funding. After that, the foundation operates independently." "What do you want in return?" "I want you to help women escape the situations you escaped. I want abusers to lose custody instead of winning it. I want the system to work better than it does." Vincent's expression was serious. "I don't want anything for myself beyond knowing that my wife's death, and the deaths of too many women like her, led to something that actually helps people." Sophia thought about Grace, about how close she'd come to losing her, about Marcus's hands around her throat and the doorman footage that had saved her and the attorney, who'd appeared from nowhere to fight for her. "I need one promise," she said. "Name it." "That this foundation helps everyone who needs it. Not just women connected to you or your family. Not just cases that make headlines. Everyone. You have my word. Every woman who walks through that door gets help. No exceptions." Sophia took a breath. "Then I accept." 3 years after Sophia had fled her home at midnight with Grace sleeping against her shoulder, she stood in an office building in downtown Manhattan with a plaque beside the door. The Grace Foundation, Legal Advocacy for Domestic Violence Survivors. The foundation had helped 347 women in its first year of operation, connected them with attorneys who'd take their cases pro bono or at reduced rates, provided court advocates who'd accompany them to hearings, offered emergency funds for women who needed to leave immediately but had no resources. Michael Castellano served on the foundation's board, along with 2 family court judges, a prosecutor who specialized in domestic violence cases, and the director of Harbor Grace Shelter. Vincent Castellano had provided additional funding beyond his initial $2 million. He'd also used his connections, legitimate and otherwise, to ensure that attorneys associated with the foundation had access to resources that helped them win cases. Sophia had learned not to ask too many questions about where certain pieces of evidence came from, or how investigators found information so quickly. She'd learned that Vincent's connections opened doors that stayed closed for most people. She'd also learned that operating in gray areas sometimes meant helping people the legal system couldn't reach. One afternoon, a woman named Teresa came to the foundation. She had a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend. Police had arrested him twice for violating it. Each time he'd been released within 48 hours. "He's going to kill me," Teresa said flatly. "I know. The restraining order doesn't stop him. Arrests don't stop him. He tells me every time he sees me that I belong to him, and if he can't have me, no one will." Sophia made a call, not to Michael, to Vincent directly. "I have a situation that needs your kind of intervention," she said carefully. "Tell me," Sophia explained. Vincent listened without interrupting. "I'll handle it," he said when she finished. "Your client will be safe by the end of the week." Sophia didn't ask what handle it meant. She didn't want to know the specifics. What she did know was that by Friday, Teresa's ex-boyfriend had left New York, moved to Nevada to live with family, according to the information Vincent shared, had dropped all contact with Teresa, blocked her on every platform, and appeared to have genuinely understood that approaching her again would have consequences he wouldn't survive. Teresa called Sophia, crying with relief. "I don't know what you did, but thank you. I can breathe again." That night, Sophia sat in her office after everyone else had left, thinking about complicated morality and gray areas and the difference between legal solutions and effective ones. Her phone rang. Vincent. "I wanted you to know. Teresa's ex-boyfriend understood the situation. He won't be returning to New York. She's safe." "What did you do?" "I had a conversation with him, and with his employer, who discovered that he'd been embezzling company funds, and with his parole officer from a previous assault charge, who learned about the restraining order violations. Sometimes multiple systems failing individually can be encouraged to work together." "You fabricated evidence?" "I presented evidence that already existed. The embezzling was real. He just hadn't been caught yet. The parole violations were documented, just not pursued. I simply made sure the right people knew about the right problems at the right time." "That's operating in gray areas," Vincent finished. "Which you knew I did when you called me." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "Does it bother you? Using illegal methods to achieve legal results?" "It bothered me greatly when I was younger. Now I'm 73 years old, and I've seen too many women die because the legal system moved too slowly or cared too little." His voice was calm, certain. "I've made peace with my methods. The question is whether you can make peace with benefiting from them." Sophia thought about Teresa, who could sleep safely tonight because Vincent Castellano had conversations that made violent men disappear. She thought about the 347 women the Grace Foundation had helped, some through purely legal means, some through Vincent's gray area interventions. She thought about Grace, who was now 7 years old and didn't remember living with Marcus, who was happy and safe because Michael Castellano had appeared in family court with evidence gathered through Vincent's connections. "I can make peace with it," Sophia said, "because women are alive who wouldn't be otherwise." "That's all that matters," Vincent said. "Complicated morality is still morality if the outcome is protecting people who need protection." 5 years after fleeing with Grace, Sophia spoke at a national conference on domestic violence prevention. "The system is broken," she told the audience of advocates, attorneys, and policymakers. "We all know this. Restraining orders that don't restrain. Police who won't act until violence occurs. Family courts that favor wealth over safety. We can advocate for change, and we should. But while we're advocating, women are dying." She paused. "So we also need practical solutions, legal advocacy that actually works, resources for immediate safety, support systems that don't require jumping through bureaucratic hoops while your abuser is threatening you." She told them about the Grace Foundation, about connecting women with attorneys, about emergency funds and court advocates, and safety planning. She didn't tell them about Vincent Castellano's conversations with violent men, about investigators who found evidence through questionable methods, about the gray area operations that made the legal victories possible. But she thought about those things, and she thought about how many women were safe because someone powerful had decided that protecting them mattered more than operating strictly within legal boundaries. After her speech, a woman approached her. "My sister was killed by her ex-husband last year. She had a restraining order. He violated it 6 times. Police kept releasing him. On the 7th time, he shot her in her driveway." "I'm so sorry," Sophia said. "Your foundation, if she'd known about it, could you have helped her?" Sophia thought about Vincent's phone number in her contacts, about the conversations that made violent men leave states, about resources that came from complicated sources but worked when legal methods didn't. Yes, she said. We could have helped her. The woman started crying. How do I make sure other women know that there's actually help available that works? You tell people, you share information, and you support organizations like ours that operate in the spaces where the system fails. That evening, Sophia met with Michael and Vincent for dinner. It had become a tradition. Once a month, the three of them would meet to discuss the Foundation's work, review difficult cases, and plan for expansion. We helped 89 women last month, Sophia reported, connected 67 with pro bono attorneys, provided emergency relocation funds for 23, and Vincent handled 3 situations that required alternative intervention. Alternative intervention, Michael repeated with slight amusement. That's a diplomatic way to describe my father threatening people. I prefer to think of it as reality education, Vincent said mildly, teaching violent men that actions have consequences. Whatever we call it. It works, Sophia said. 3 women are safe who wouldn't be if we'd relied purely on legal channels. And legally? Michael asked. We're maintaining clean separation between the Foundation and my father's other interests. Completely. The Foundation's finances are transparent. All our legal advocacy is properly documented. If anyone investigates, they'll find a legitimate nonprofit helping women. Sophia paused. The fact that some of our success comes from Vincent's connections is impossible to prove and beside the point. Vincent smiled. My son worries too much about appearances. One of us has to, Michael said. You've spent 50 years not worrying about them. They sat together, the domestic violence survivor, the mob attorney, and the mafia boss, planning how to help more women escape the situations that should have killed them but didn't. It was an unlikely partnership, built on complicated morality, in gray area operations, and the shared understanding that sometimes protecting people required methods the law wouldn't approve. But it worked, and women lived who would have died. And for Sophia, who'd once stood in a courtroom certain she'd lose custody of her daughter to a man who'd strangled her, that was enough. Grace was 9 now. She knew her mother ran a foundation helping women. She knew Uncle Michael was a lawyer who helped families. She knew Mr. Vincent was a powerful man who supported good causes. She didn't know about restraining orders that failed, or evidence gathered illegally, or conversations that made violent men disappear. She just knew she was safe, that her mother was strong, that there were people who protected them. And someday, when she was older, she'd understand the full complexity of how that protection worked. The legal and less legal methods, the legitimate advocacy and gray area interventions, the difference between how things should work and how they actually did. But for now, she was a child who could sleep safely, who didn't have nightmares about angry fathers, who lived in a house full of purple paint and scattered toys and photos on the refrigerator. And that, Sophia thought, was worth every complicated moral compromise.